Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. We've recently launched our Patreon page, which can be found at cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon. If you aren't familiar with Patreon, it's an easy way for those who are interested in this show to help out by simply pledging a small amount each month in sponsorship. Now that could be as little as $5 a month, which is about £3.80, or as much as you like. You will enable us to dedicate more time creating more content to help you, including videos, more blog posts, and even more shows. So if you can, head over to cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon and get involved. In this episode, we talked to Lars Klint about Hololens. Lars is based in Melbourne, Australia. He is an author, a trainer, a Microsoft MVP, a community leader, an authority on all things Windows platform, and he's a part-time crocodile wrangler. He's a published Pluralsight author and has been part of the software development community for the past 20 years. Lars also co-organises Developer Melbourne Community Conference, organises developer events with Microsoft, and also runs part-time car registration business. Welcome to Cynical Developer.
Thanks very much, James. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good to get you on to talk about HoloLens, something I don't know a lot about. And looking at that list of things you do, you're very similar to me. That I doubt you have much downtime at all.
I don't like sitting still, to be honest. What you didn't have on the intro is that I actually run a bed and breakfast as well.
Right.
Apart from that, so we have our hands full, but that's the way we like it. And I always try and get into, I guess, interesting projects, whatever kind of tickles my fancy.
Sure. It's the devil makes work for idle hands, I guess, and I suffer with that exact same thing, and that's how I ended up with this podcast. I found myself with a few hours free during the week, and I thought, well, what should I do with that? Should I have some time for me? No, I'll start a podcast.
I know the feeling. I run a podcast as well with a guy in Alaska that I've never met. So there you go.
Nice.
We can always find time for it.
Yeah. Cool. So we're here today to talk about HoloLens, and we'll go straight in for people that have no idea about what a HoloLens is. So what is a HoloLens?
A HoloLens. So most people have heard about virtual reality. Virtual reality is something that's been around since probably the late 80s, mid 80s. I remember in the early 90s, I tried a virtual reality headset or device where you stood up in this big monstrosity of a thing and got this massive mask on, and you could see a different world. It was a virtual world of virtual reality. From that, it kind of grew into being more commercialized. It kind of went away. Companies were still using virtual reality in some aspects, especially for engineering. It was easy to manipulate engineering, schemas and architectural drawings and all that in virtual reality. But nothing really happened. And then suddenly we got these, plethora of virtual reality devices. Most people have heard of the Oculus Rift and of the HTC Vive, which are commercially or consumer good, essentially, the experience you get is meant for consumers.
Yeah.
And then from that, a couple of years ago, suddenly we had what Microsoft called the HoloLens. And it wasn't a virtual reality device. On the other hand, it was a device that would show you digital assets on top of the real world. And then most people that listen to this might say, oh, hang on, that's augmented reality. And fair enough, you can kind of call a HoloLens using augmented reality, but in essence, it's called mixed reality, and we'll get back to that later. I'm sure you have questions around that.
Yeah.
But the HoloLens is a self-contained computer that you have on your head. It looks kind of like Star Trek goggles or something that you have on, and when you look through it, you see holograms placed in your real world. So the HoloLens has a 3D modeling built in. So it continuously scans your environment, builds up a 3D model of where you are, of your exact room, and you can then use that 3D model with digital assets, so models or characters or sounds or whatever, and you can kind of combine the two, hence the term mixed reality. And what this allows you to do is you can have your real world and you can sit with holograms. That's why I usually call myself the chief hologram maker, just because it's so easy. It's so easy to just kind of make up new things and add them into this world. So the HoloLens is a self-contained hologram maker. It's a computer that sits on your head that allows you to see augmented reality in relation to your real world. Hence, it's called mixed reality device. I don't know. Is that a good explanation? Does that give you an
Yeah,
idea of kind of
yeah, it
what it does?
does. It does. So what's the difference between the HoloLens and the other virtual reality headsets that are all out there? Because there's definitely a
Yeah,
big price point difference between them and what we know as virtual reality headsets. So like you said, the Vive and the Oculus Rift.
definitely. And I knew you'd come back to the price because that is one of the eye openers. Let's say
Yeah,
the HoloLens is around $3,000 US, which is an obscene amount of money. And if you look at that compared to the Vive, which I think is now $600 or $700, or the Oculus Rift is around the same, maybe $800. There's a big. The reason is that the Oculus and the Vive they are virtual reality devices, and they now have some tracking of your environment, so you can get these cameras should you put up in your play area, as it's usually called in virtual reality. And in your virtual reality goggles on, you can see these markers and you can see the controllers that you hold in this world. So you
yeah,
get this sense of where the space is. But in general, there's no sort of idea of where you are in relation to the real world. Whereas with the HoloLens, you look through the visors or through the glass. It's called waveguides. There's three of them that give you the colors of red, green, blue, and projects the holograms on. You look at those, and they're by all means they're transparent. But when there is part of the digital asset or digital world, you see these holograms in your real world, and it's super stable. Like the mathematics involved in the HoloLens is absolutely mind-boggling. I don't pretend to understand any of it because I'm not I'm not Stephen Hawkins.
sure.
Um, but when you say you place something in the room and you place it next to this chair you have, and as you move about in the room, move around it, it is completely 100% stable and sits exactly where you put it at all times.
Right. Okay.
And that is just, if you think of it as a nerd and as the mathematics, it's unbelievable. It's really, really convincing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a small play with, I think it was possibly the Vive at an expo not that long ago, and it was a little bit disorientating because they give you these stick things to hold, and they're your hands in the virtual reality world. But when you look down, you're not there. You can't see your arms and your legs or anything like that. So that is a little bit odd, which I guess because the HoloLens is projecting these things onto the real world, you don't have that sort of motion sickness or anything from it.
Not really. I've read some reports of about maybe 2 or 3% of people just can't wear it for various reasons. They get, I don't know if it's motion sickness, but they get uncomfortable. I have never come across anyone trying it that couldn't wear it because of that. Some people can't wear it because their glasses are too big. You can actually use it with glasses, which is handy because I wear glasses.
Yep.
But it's you don't get any of that sense of disconnect from the real world. It is really quite convincing, and that's part of the appeal to it. And certainly in my case is that I can take your real world that you're in, no matter where you are in whatever room. It's not an outdoor device really. Let's just clear that up. In whatever room you're in, and I can enhance that. I can place a character on the chair next to you. I can identify what a couch is. I can see where the walls are. I can hang stuff on the walls. There's a particular good experience or app or game. Now, just a disclaimer, I don't think the HoloLens is a gaming device, but currently the best experiences are games. And one of them is one called Fragments, where you are a memory detective. And it's one of these showcase apps that's made by Microsoft to kind of sell the HoloLens.
Yeah.
But what they've done is absolutely incredible. And they map your whole room you're in. So they say you've got to look at more walls or the space on the floor or the ceiling or whatever it might be. And it then gives you the experience of the game is that the level you're on gives you a real sense of being in that game, because suddenly you look up and there's a hole in your ceiling and it's raining in, and you hear the rain from where it is, like, and there's another window on the wall, and you look out the window and there's trams going by, and you can look through the window, and as you move closer you can see more of the world outside.
Right. Okay.
And all of these is incredibly convincing. Now that's not done by one person in a week, obviously. That's a large experiment, but it just shows that the having the foresight, or the thinking outside the box, to use a cliched term, is really important, because we just don't know how this thing is going to work in the world that we're in, because we have never tried one before. Whereas virtual reality, my narrow vision here is I find it easier in the sense that you can design and control everything.
Yeah.
The virtual world is yours to manipulate and design and display to the user, where you don't get that with the HoloLens. So that to me is a big difference. Also why it's so expensive, just because it has a lot more variables to take into account, I guess, compared to a VR device.
Yeah, yeah. So at the start, you mentioned mixed reality and that it's not augmented reality. So people will probably understand what augmented reality is. They probably use their mobile phone, and if they've done the things where they turn the camera on and they can put a filter on and there's dinosaurs walking around their front room and stuff like that. How is that different? What's the difference between augmented reality and mixed reality?
To be honest, for all intents and purposes, when you talk about it in general terms, there's not much of a difference. There's a difference when you need to talk to developers, which obviously the podcast is aimed at. And so for a consumer, it's not a big difference. And to be honest, I don't think Microsoft necessarily need to sell it as mixed reality. They can just say to consumers, hey, here's a new augmented or virtual reality device, and no one would know it. It'd be any device.
Sure.
Right. But for developers, it's important to understand this of reality. And granted, these lines are blurring more and more. Devices become more sophisticated. But in general, you have an augmented device that overlays data on the real world. So this could be kind of your heads-up display type scenario, or it could be, as you said, a mobile device where there's some sort of trigger point. I've seen some brilliant augmented apps where one of them was a brochure for some luxury yacht, and as you point the app at this brochure, the luxury yacht comes out of the brochure and starts bobbing on top of it like it's on water.
Nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful, really, really well done. And that to me, that is the kind of simplified, contained experience where you have something that triggers it,
Yep.
and then you have that kind of limited experience. That to me is the traditional thought around augmented reality, where mixed reality is, hey, I'm going to use whatever objects and whatever structures there are in the room to kind of enhance my app.
Sure.
So this now is changing though, because I don't know if you've heard of the Apple AR kit for iOS.
All right. No.
And there's that, and then for Google it's called the AR. AR Core is kind of built on something else called Project Tango, just to kind of give you a bit of background. But those two, the AR kit and the AR Core, are pushing the limits for what a mobile device can do. And it's very exciting because they now started to do tracking. So tracking of surfaces, as in, hey, here's a table, here's the floor. And you can use that to then place objects as well. But it's still augmented. I wouldn't call that mixed reality necessarily. And this is where the lines are really starting to blur. And I think in the next 2, 3, 4 years, they may combine and may become almost, inconsequential which one you use. And this is where we see something like the IKEA app for iOS, which apparently is only available in the US so far. And that allows you to place IKEA furniture in your actual room. It knows where the floors are. Okay. Now, having tried both, all three of these, so the AR Kit, the AR Core, and the HoloLens is miles ahead in terms of tracking and placing objects and mapping your world. There's such a big disconnect when you look at it from a developer point of view, because it's much more consistent on the HoloLens platform. But I have no doubt that Google and Apple will catch up to that at some point with what they're doing. But yeah, that's very exciting.
Yeah, because I guess as you said, the HoloLens is a computer. It's dedicated to it rather than some of the kits that are on these other devices. That they're multi-purpose. They haven't got the processing power that the HoloLens has got.
Definitely. And to be, just to clarify, there's no kit needed for AR Core or AR Kit. They just
Right.
work with the devices that come now. Now for AR Core, you do need quite high-end devices so far, and the same for Apple's. But in Apple's world, is not such a big deal because most people will upgrade their devices every couple of
Yeah.
years. So they'll catch up quick, and I think that'll really, really push the whole AR, MR world to just, create things we just never thought of. I think that'll go real quick as soon as there's a couple of 100 million devices on on
Yeah.
iOS that has it. So that's, to me, that's really exciting. I'm glad that Apple is finally kind of doing something. Yeah, everybody says they're copying everybody else. They might be, but they do push platforms
Sure.
and make competitors be better. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that that the HoloLens, it's a real contender, that it's going to have some good use? It's not just a gimmick. So like we had 3D TVs that for a couple of years where everybody had to have a 3D TV. Now I've got one. I think I've used it twice, maybe 3 times when I first got it, but after that I haven't used it, and I don't know anyone else that actually sits and watches 3D films and things. They should go to the cinema and they'd watch them there, but it was just a bit of a gimmick, I think.
Yeah, I forgot about 3D TV. To be honest, I don't even know if mine does it. I have no idea. um, is it a gimmick? Definitely. It still is kind of, it's a developer kit on a consumer grade hardware. That doesn't mean though that some enterprises haven't bought a lot of them. And there's some good examples that's been showcased. There's a elevator company from Germany called ThyssenKrupp, and they also do ski lifts and that sort of large structures of some sort of transportation. They've done some really cool stuff with service and maintenance, building in-house chairlifts, or not
Right.
chairlifts. Disabled people that
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
get upstairs, they can sit on a chair and get carted up. There's a really good demo with that where they kind of do everything in the HoloLens as they're there in the room with the customer. It
Oh,
says this
nice.
is what's going to look like, and then they can send off the blueprints from that directly to manufacturing and skip a whole bunch of steps.
Oh, right.
So
Okay, yeah.
I think HoloLens is an enterprise device. I genuinely believe that. I don't think it's a gaming device, even though, as I said, best experiences definitely are games so far that you can get your hands on as a HoloLens owner. That'll change. That'll change as healthcare find users for it. They'll pump a lot of money into it. I've spoken to pharmaceutical companies that is they've already bought, and this is the kind of companies that go, that's a good idea for a project. Let's buy 10. Like there's just so much money there to throw at these kind of. Those are the companies that will drive the development and the innovation in this case. But I've also spoken to educational facilities, schools that are interested in it. There's a school in Canberra that already has a number of devices that they use to teach chemistry and physics. There's a lot of applications for it, but I don't think it's something that you're going to give your 12-year-old for Christmas. I don't think it's going to get to that point. However, I do think that the MR headsets, so this is the new generation of headsets that come out in the last month, so sort of from October 2017,
Yep.
when the fall creators update came out for Windows 10, there was a big push for mixed reality there. So if you have that on your Windows 10 machine, if you have the latest Windows 10 update, you'll go to your settings, or you can go to your settings, and you'll see there's a whole mixed reality segment or menu option on the settings. And that's all designed to push mixed reality, either headsets or even on the desktop.
Right.
And those headsets are kind of $300-400. So I think that's probably the way that consumers are going to experience mixed reality. Now, I don't know if you want me to talk about these headsets as well, or kind of that is a bit of a tangent to the discussion, I guess, around HoloLens.
Yeah, but I guess that's going to open the barrier to it a little bit, because when I've looked at it, the HoloLens, apart from the fact that it's got a huge price tag on it, the size of the device always puts me off a little bit because it's massive. Is it are these consumer units a similar size to the HoloLens, or are they more on par with like the Google glasses? Because that would be an ideal size that I think I would go, yes, I will buy one of those.
So that's actually a good point, a good question. The MR headsets, for all intents and purposes, if you're a consumer, they're VR headset.
Right.
They're the same size as your Oculus and your Vive. They don't provide a view of the real world, and they show you essentially a virtual reality world.
Yep.
So that's kind of where we are with that. I'll get back to the glasses question in just a second because there's an interesting tangent to that as well. But for the mixed reality headsets, this is where, because the HoloLens runs Windows 10, right? It's essentially just a Windows 10 device. And they want to push Windows 10 from Microsoft's side, I would imagine, because that sells licenses, that gets people on the platform, that gets the whole ecosystem boost, so that you have Windows 10 on your desktop and so on. And the VR, the MR headsets don't run an operating system. They're tethered. So where the HoloLens has no cables coming off, it's completely self-contained. The MR headsets all have some sort of long HDMI and USB cable attached to them. So that is in tradition with the general VR headsets. They all are tethered, except now for the Oculus to go. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called.
Right.
There's now an Oculus that they've announced that doesn't have any cables on it. So that's exciting. We'll see how that works when that comes out. But the MR headsets do have what's called inside-out tracking. So they have cameras on the front that track your real environment and can build a 3D model of your world. However, I have not yet seen anyone do that. And as far as I know, the development side of it is still a little bit lagging behind. And the mixed reality in this case refers to the spacing or the physical space that you occupy is in accordance with where you are. So if you take a step in the VR world, it's a real step in the real world kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is a little bit, the message is a little bit polluted, I think. To me, it's the VR headset, and I think it would have been much easier to understand if Microsoft just called a VR headset, but they obviously want to push their mixed reality terminology. So
yeah.
But I think this is probably the way we're going to go with consumers, and enterprises is going to go down the HoloLens route, unless some new magic device that we have will appear soon. That's kind of my gut feel.
Right. Okay.
Hang on. I did say I was going to come back to the glasses question.
Yes.
So that is a really good point, because most people don't want to run around with a massive headset on. And I totally get that. You do not look like the coolest kid on the street, that's for sure. And, it's a little bit cumbersome, and it's just not practical. So there's a company called Magic Leap, which is also in the mixed reality space. And I don't want to bag him or do anything, but the facts are that they so far raised $6 billion and haven't produced anything. So I'm a little bit they're very mysterious, secretive company. So I'm sure they have something in some basement somewhere that's magical. But so far we haven't seen anything. They did have a promise of having essentially normal glasses that were mixed reality, that would overlay holograms on your real world and everything. They did produce a video that showed how that could look, which was very impressive.
Yeah.
But so far we haven't seen anything from him. But that's the only kind of thing I can think of on that. In that relation.
Yeah, because I did finally. I decided, yes, I'm going to buy a pair of the Google glasses, and by the time I'd sort of talked myself into buying them, they stopped making them. So I never managed to get my hands on a pair.
No. There are rumors that they may be doing some again or something similar, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
They were very much a heads-up display kind of thing that would just show you data in the real world. But there were certainly some privacy issues around that, being able to take photos without people knowing, and videoing and all that stuff. So that's probably why it went away.
So we've said that the HoloLens itself is a computer, so I don't need a powerful PC to run it like I do some of the current VR headsets that are out there.
That is correct. It is it's actually quite a normal computer. It's not really that groundbreaking. It's a 32-bit device as well. It has 2 gigs of RAM, 65 gigabytes of memory, and when it runs Windows 10, it does have this magic HPU, holographic processing unit, which they have gotten from Star Trek.
Right. Okay.
No, not really.
From the holodeck.
Bespoke. Exactly. It's a bespoke piece of hardware that does all of the holographic calculations, and it does some obscene amount, like a high-end graphics card kind of
Yeah.
range of calculations per second. So that's kind of where the magic is coming from. And then obviously the compact, packaging is really quite impressive as well.
Yeah.
So the computing-wise, it's not particularly impressive, but it's all the the mathematics and all the sensors and the sound and all that just makes it an unbelievable experience.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it was actually a computer in itself, and that's what always sort of, I think, justified my reasoning, at least to myself, with being a little bit put off by the size of it, because you obviously see some of these other VR headsets that are reasonably well sized, but they're not. They haven't, they're not a computer. They haven't got everything in. They're relying on your desktop for it. Whereas this has got the computer in it. It's got all the batteries in it for it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's got everything in it.
Yeah, I think I read something about the batteries being okay, but not great. But you could also get an external battery pack for it. I don't know how true that is.
It's a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours on the battery, which is actually not. That's okay.
Yeah.
If you do a general development cycle, you would probably have it plugged in when it's on your desk anyway. And in terms of the battery pack, there's no official battery pack, but there's a couple of developers that I've spoken to that found a few different more suited battery packs that they would plug in, and they can get something like 8 or 9 hours out of it.
Right. Okay.
Which is quite good, but it does consume a fair amount of power. I'm not sure what size batteries are in it, but I think they're pretty decent.
Yeah, sure. It's quite a scary thought having those batteries so close to your head as well, because I play airsoft and we use lithium polymer batteries, and I've had a couple of those over the years catch fire in my gun. While using it, so that's from overuse.
So fine.
Yeah, so you don't want to go down the Samsung route and have one of them exploding next to your head.
No, that's an involuntary haircut right there.
Yeah. If you've got any hair, if you've lucky enough. So we talked a little bit about the price point. It's about $3,000. I think it's about £2,500 from what I've looked at. But where can I get one of these? Where do I buy one from? Because I guess I don't go down to the high street and buy it in the local PC World or something.
No, it was funny though when they first came out. They were released in waves, and you had to be signed up to get the privilege of being invited to spend $3,000. It was kind of funny, and I was in wave 4, and it was all a big deal. After I got actually I two others because none of us wanted to spend that much money. And so we just share it, which is fine because you don't need it all the time.
Yep.
And right after we bought it, it was freely available to everybody. It's like, oh man, really? So the novelty of kind of wore off. But you can buy them in the Microsoft Store. It was very limited. Initially, it was only US. Then they opened up to a few more countries like the UK and Germany. And just recently, like a week ago, they added another 29 countries, mainly in Europe. So my home country of Denmark has now got them available in the Microsoft Store. So if you don't have it in your local country's Microsoft Store, you can probably get one from nearby. I can't remember the list off the top of my head now because there's so many, but it's not hard to get.
Right.
If you want to spend the money on it, you can definitely find a way to get it.
Sure.
But the official Microsoft Store is one way. You can also buy them through Amazon, which probably would enable more countries to get it. But as far as I know, they're a reseller from the Microsoft Store as well.
Sure. And you're saying that you don't need the device all the time. So I guess you could actually develop for it without owning one. Do they do like a virtual headset for it?
It's becoming all Inception-wise here.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is. So I didn't have... Actually, the first talks I did, which was one in Belgium and one in Sydney, I didn't even have a headset.
Right.
Which was my team. And people went, oh, well, that's good because you don't have one either. So now we're on the same level, right?
Yeah.
And Dave didn't buy that though. So development-wise, you don't push it all the time to the HoloLens because it takes time. So just to quickly, considering this is a developer show, touch on the development lifecycle, you do everything in Unity. You'll have to learn Unity and make it your best friend, or at least be kind of, acquainted with it, because it's a 3D, most likely. You can build a 2D app as well. You can take your Windows 10 app and you can launch it on HoloLens and run it there, no problem. But it'll be just a window in a virtual, in the world, right? It'll just sit kind of hanging in space.
Yeah.
But you use Unity, which is a 3D, essentially game making tool, which is quite commonly used in the game making industry. No, I'm not a 3D designer or anything, but I've had to learn a lot of this stuff. And you use Unity to build what's called scenes. In game world, it would be a level. So you have a scene, and you then put your holograms or your assets into that scene along with your lighting. You add music, audio. You use scripting. So C# is the language of choice in Unity, and you use that to script your actions. So there's some built-in APIs for Unity that works with HoloLens. There's a HDK, a HoloLens development kit, that comes as part of Unity now. It's all very, very well integrated with Unity. And then you build your app there. You export it to Visual Studio if you want to add other stuff, stuff that's not available in Unity. And then you can push it either to the emulator, which is a Hyper-V implementation of essentially the OS of HoloLens. And then you can use it there, and the emulator is very good. It does give you the majority of features and functions that you would find on the HoloLens, but obviously you don't have it on your head.
Yep.
It's a 2D representation of a 3D world.
Sure.
So you use your keyboard to move around and everything, but that works quite well. And then in the last, that was probably 6 months ago, they added a simulator. So it's not an emulator. An emulator has its own IP address, its own network address, everything. And simulator is just simulating it in Unity, but it's a very quick button press to see how it would look in the 3D world on the HoloLens Unity. So that is your general development cycle. As you go through Unity, you do everything in Unity, you keep press and pray, adjusting your scripts and your models and everything. And then once in a while, you'll push it to Visual Studio and onto either a real device or the emulator. So there is that kind of cadence, I guess. You don't really need it all the time.
All right. Okay. Cool. So you're a Pluralsight author. Do you have Pluralsight courses on developing for the HoloLens?
I love that leading question. Well, yes, I do, James. I did. I realized a fundamentals course. So how do you even get started with this thing?
Yep.
And a bit about there's some things in there that people don't normally look at, such as testing, because testing for a 3D app is not as straightforward as it might seem to some people. You have unit tests in Unity, but testing all the bespoke features that the platform brings with it is quite interesting. So there's a bit of that as well. Okay. And actually, I just released another course. That's right, a week ago.
All right.
With a good friend of mine, Stephen Haunts, who is from your neck of the woods, and where we talk with each other. It's called Play by Play. That's the kind of style where we talk about an hour about digital realities in general, but also more about HoloLens.
Okay.
So there is that, and I've written a bunch of stuff, and I'm writing an ebook, and it's all coming.
Nice. Well, what we'll do is we'll get the links from you, and we'll stick those into the show notes for anybody that wants to go and have a play with it. And it, as we've said, if you haven't got $3,000 or whatever equivalent in your local currency, then you can still have a play in the emulated and simulated version. There we go, and it's free.
Yeah, you can download all the tooling for free.
Nice. That's good. That's what we like to hear. Yeah. So
exactly.
So we can still build something and have a play around with it, which is good. If I could find some more time somewhere, I think I would definitely go and have a play with it. But I'll just have to, for now, add it to the ever-growing list of things I need to go and have a play around with.
Yeah, it's actually not as hard as you think.
Right.
Building your first app is not as difficult. It's when you get all your cool ideas and actually trying to implement those, that's when you kind of run trouble.
Yeah, cool.
So,
right, well, we're just about out of time, so thank you very much for coming on and talking about HoloLens and putting a few things in perspective for me, because I've read a little bit about it and I've listened to other podcasts talk about it, and I've always come away still not quite understanding what the device is about and how you use it and things. Like I said earlier, I didn't even realize that it was a whole computer within the in the headset. I thought it was still tethered to a desktop somewhere. So it's been good. It's definitely been informative, at least for me, even if it's not for the listeners out there.
Excellent. No, I'm glad. I'm always happy to try and share my passion for this kind of devices. It is, I think, is where the future is headed. If not for consumers, at least for enterprise. So it's very exciting. Yeah,
definitely. And undoubtedly, somebody will release an add-on for Visual Studio, so you can type your code with gestures and things like they did with the Guitar Hero guitar, which I saw a very cool demo of online. And I don't think anybody's ever used it because it's really impractical.
Yeah, I think it would be. It's someone has built their whole entire desktop, screens in the HoloLens experience. So they had all the windows around the room, and it was not very productive.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Cool. Well, again, thanks for coming on, and thanks to all the listeners out there. You've been listening to Cynical Developer. I'm James Stoddart, and this was Lars Klint talking about the HoloLens. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help the Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.